This evening we're going to Tom's Place at DeSoto, and it's a very old restaurant and bar. And it was 70 years ago. It was the place to eat in Jackson County. And it was quite pricey for the time. I don't remember the cost of a meal, but it was, for the time, it was one of the better restaurants. And so we went there for dinner, not the evening we were married. The evening we were married, my mother had a cake and punch and coffee and that kind of little reception, my mom and dad, at their home. And then we went to Marion and stayed overnight over there at a hotel. And then the next day, we were on our way home from there and stopped at Tom's for dinner. So and I don't know whether I had been to Tom's or not. Had you been there?
Oh, yes.
You had been.
I had been. That was the place to go for steak.
Yeah.
They were known for serving steak. And there weren't many steakhouses in the county at that time. No. You going to answer or you want me to?
You want me to? Yeah. We're celebrating our 70th anniversary. 70 years ago, it was a day much like today. It was spring, quite cool. I remember I did not have a white wedding dress. We were married. I had on a blue crepe dress, sleeveless, with a ruffle around it. I thought it was very pretty, and I bought it here in Carbondale at one of the stores on University Avenue. And my remembrance is that I probably paid like $24.95 for it, and that was pretty expensive at that time. And I was very proud of it and wore it for years for dress-up occasions.
And I had sold a bull calf for $100, and that's what I bought her diamond with. $100.
I thought it was $125.
Well, it might have been, but it wasn't. In today's money,
right?
It would be a very cheap ring.
No, well, it wasn't a cheap ring. That's what they cost then. Yeah. What that one cost.
Is that the same one you're wearing now?
And the wedding ring, it was a set.
He asked if that was the same ring you're wearing now.
No, this is not the same ring.
Do you still have your original?
Well, this has the diamonds in it from my ring, and also, I think maybe Naomi is wearing the little diamond that was in the center of my engagement ring. I had it made into a locket. The rings wore in two. I wore them, I didn't take them off and protect them for daily work. I wore them all the time. So those did wear out. And this, my wedding ring, you want to tell where that came from? Or do you remember?
That was my grandpa Will Doerr's wedding ring.
Not grandpa.
Grandpa
Doerr's.
I probably didn't know you before I was in the Navy, did I?
No, you were in the Navy and I was in high school.
Yeah.
And Ruth, Bill's sister Ruth, and I were best friends. And were you home from
I
service?
Came home from the Navy, and Harlan and Ramona were dating.
Yeah.
And Harlan and Ramona would go to the movie in Dad's car, and Ruth would go along, and you'd go along, and I was home single, and I got to go into the movie with them. And
I remember, do you remember the ice cream social at the Methodist Church?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Well, that was the summer Bill had come home from the Navy, I believe, am I right?
Yeah, I came home in May, early May.
Okay, and this was in August. So Bill had come, I guess, probably with Ruth, your sister, Ruth, you'd come as a family to the ice cream social. And I was hanging around with the group, and I don't know how we decided we'd go to Murfreesboro, but several of us, including Bill, decided we'd go to Murfreesboro. We didn't have a car. So we walked out to Uncle Frank. Do you remember this?
No.
Walked out to Uncle Frank's. Uncle Frank and Aunt Dorothy Doerr lived on the highway in Virginia. And we walked out there, and it was summertime, August. And the house was all dark. They'd gone to bed. This was probably 9:30, it was getting late. And maybe 9. And so we went to under their bedroom window, and Bill, I guess, woke Uncle Frank up and asked if he could borrow his car. So we borrowed Uncle Frank's car and drove to Murfreesboro. And that was really the first time I ever thought about Bill as he was a serviceman. He was older, and he was home from service, and he looked pretty good to me. So.
Man, she has a better memory of that than I do.
Well,
but that
women do for that kind of thing.
Well, my first idea was that she was just my sister's best friend.
Yeah.
And I was just going along with them because that was the car that was going to the movie, and I wanted to go to the movie with them. But after one or two movies, I think we started thinking differently, didn't we?
Well, was that the summer then that you came back to SIU?
Yes.
Bill came back to SIU, and Bill's sister Ruth, and I was I still a freshman?
You came to SIU as a freshman.
Yeah.
And I think, did I ride down here with you, or did we ride?
Probably came together because that was convenient. And he lived up on Main Street, right?
Where the hospital is now.
Yeah, where the hospital is. And he ate his meals at a
Johnson's Co-op.
At a boarding type place that served meals about a block on toward the university from where I lived. And I was kind of watching for him to come walking down the street, So, which is kind of, we were both here and both in school, and, we just kind of started hanging out together. And,
both from Virginia High School, of course.
Yeah, well, you had graduated, you had been gone to service, though. And I was just a freshman, really, really a freshman. I didn't know Carbondale was probably the biggest town I had, well, it was the biggest town I'd ever lived in, I know. So I was kind of way out there on untried ground. Oh, gosh, I don't remember. You remember?
No, I really don't. That's not very romantic not to remember that, isn't it?
Did you?
No.
Why did you want to marry each other?
Well, I was crazy about him. I was nuts about him. I was very young, as I said. And I hadn't dated very many people, so.
How old were you?
He was,
She was
18.
18.
Oh, I was 19.
One day, 2 days before we got married. Her birthday, 29th of March, and we got married on the 2nd of April. She was 19 on the March 29th, and we got married on April 2nd. Just about the minimum time.
The minimum time. 9 months and 3 days or something like that. And I said that, Grandma Ida kind of drew a deep breath of relief when we'd been married long enough for it to be legal, legitimate, and so forth. So, yeah, the old ladies and virgins were counting the days, so was I. I was hoping I would not deliver early. So, Kathy was born in January, and Virginia was born the following May. So, 15 months after we were married, we had 2 children, 2 babies. And then we went to Champaign for Bill was going to go back to school, and we went to moved to Champaign with our two little ones, and Virginia was just a few months old, wasn't she? Or was she a year and a few months?
A year and a few months.
It was 1952.
51 when we went there.
Was it 51? Then
Yeah.
52 when we went to Raymond.
Raymond, you're right.
Yeah. When Virginia was born, I went to Mom, and when I knew we were expecting Virginia, I was upset, and I said to my mother, I don't know what I'm going to do, how I'm going to manage 2 babies, And she said, well, one baby takes all your time. So the next one, you just divide it up a little differently. So that was the advice I had from my mother about child rearing. Kathy was born in 1949. Virginia was born in 1950. Then in 51, we went to Raymond. Went to
52.
U of I. 51, we went to U of I, and 52, we moved to Raymond. And 54, Naomi was born.
Well, in some respects, it was a circus because they had playmates the same age, and sometimes there would be 6 of them, wasn't there? Truby's,
Yeah.
our 3,
Most of the time.
Truby's 3, and 1 or 2 others. And they were a pack. They would go from one house to the other. We lived all along the same block. So
They collected goodies from all the moms, and when one mom ran out of goodies, they'd go to the next house.
Oh, there are several. They had a record player, and we would buy kids' records for them. And that record player ran countless hours every day, didn't it?
Well, as long as they were up.
Yeah. Little songs on the children's songs. But your mother, one night, Virginia, she went through the living room, into the front bedroom, the hall, past the bathroom door, into the second bathroom, and what did she say? I'm taking the long way. She was sleepwalking in her sleep, but she went through 4 different rooms. Said, I'm taking the long way.
She went through our bedroom. She said, I'm taking the long way around. When
the girls were little.
We were always full time. We didn't have much free time. In Virginia's, we lived in an old house that had been built.
No, in Raymond.
In Raymond. I'm sorry. The house had been built by a family that was retiring from the farm. So they built this house and a garage and a chicken house and planted a bunch of fruit trees and grapevines. So it was like a tiny farm. It was three city lots is what it was. So we raised chickens. We had a garden. We had fruit. We had a cow. After a while, we had a cow block down the street I rented a pasture there and a little barn. So Betty pasteurized the milk, and she had 2 or 3 customers that she
sold milk.
sold milk to. We had always had lots of food, good food. No, we lived paycheck to paycheck. We had insurance, and we had a car, but money was very scarce. There in those days, no credit cards. I did charge gasoline at the local Shell station by the month, and then pay the bill at the end of the month. But no one had credit cards then.
Oh, no, there were not credit cards.
No.
But we did run a credit at the grocery store also.
Yeah.
And paid it, what's that, Stewart's grocery store. But we didn't have any spare money. Well, I'm sure we had arguments, and of course
Not arguments so much as debates. I mean, it wasn't bitter, but well, I suppose when we got ready to build a new house, it was not all. I mean, we didn't agree on everything all the time about that till we lived in a rented house the first, I believe, about 5 years, wasn't it?
Okay.
And then we decided to build a new house, and we saw that an old house was for sale. And it wasn't a house anymore. It was a shack. It was about to fall into the ground. But we saw that it was for sale. And the bank was in charge of the sale. And I went down to the bank and talked to the president, Mr. McNaughton, and I said, we would like to know more about that house. I said, who do we have to see to go and look at it? And he said, oh, just go on down. He says, just 3 blocks down the street from where you live, go on down and look at it. So we went and looked, and it looked like it was not worth tearing down. But I went back and told Mr. McNaughton we would be interested in it, but it was going to be sold on the 22nd of December. And I said, we're going to be down at our parents' home on the 22nd, going down there for Christmas. I said, what can we do about bidding on that? It was going to be sold at auction. He said, oh, you just tell me how high you're willing to go, and I'll bid for you. So we decided we would give so much, and I don't know what that maximum was, but it was maybe $3,000 or $4,000.
It wasn't that much. Did we pay $800 for those lots?
I stretched it a little bit. No, I think we paid $2,200.
Okay.
On the 22nd, the sale was supposed to be at 2 o'clock. About 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I called Mr. McNaughton and I said, did the house sell? Oh, yes. Well, I went to the bank and told him that we would go up a certain amount, whatever it was. And he said, you won't have to go that high. So as I started to say, on the 22nd, I called him and I said, did the house sell? Oh, yes, you're the owner. How much did it sell for? $2,200, wasn't it?
I didn't remember that much.
$2,200. And so we came home, I guess maybe the day after Christmas, and the girls and I, Kathy and Virginia, the 2 older girls, and I started tearing that house down. And the girls were in charge of the burn piles. A lot of it was just take it to the burn pile and burn it. But I salvaged the this framing lumber. It was rough cut pine, not planed. And we saved that. But anyway, before Christmas vacation was finished, we had that house completely down, and the burning lumber was burned, and the salvaged lumber was in storage. And then we had until summer. We planned to build a house, got our plans all drawn, and I went down and talked to Mr. McNaughton again. I said, what do I do about financing? He said, well, just go to the lumber yard and you just buy on credit as until they ask you for payment, and then you come in and we'll do the loan. So I scheduled my vacation for the 4th day of July, beginning of 4th of July. And I had a young man hired to work for me. Got up that morning and it was raining hard. There was no chance that we could work outside that day. And I thought, what am I going to do? I've got my vacation time. I went in and called the lumber yard and told them to bring me so many 2x4s. I cut studs all day. I called, send me so many 2x6s. I cut 2x6. Worked. It continued raining the entire week. And I continued cutting lumber.
Well, but tell Michael where you were doing that.
In the shop, in the ag shop where out at school. On Friday afternoon, I borrowed a farmer's truck, and the boy that was working for me and I loaded that truck. We had over 2,000 pieces of lumber cut to size. And I had a carpenter hired to help me Monday morning. He come to work with his high school age helper. I told Bob was the carpenter's name. I said, Friday night, when Friday night comes, you're going to be known as the fastest carpenter in this town with all this lumber cut to size, or I'm going to be the biggest fool in town if it doesn't work. Well, it worked. And Friday night, we had that house set up, blacked in, the roof on it. And then we moved in just about the time school opened, didn't we? Bare plywood floors, living in the basement, no heat in the house yet. Thanksgiving time came, and Virginia asked me, she said, Daddy, when is Christmas? And I said, oh, it's a little better than a month away. Why, hon? Why do you want to know? I thought maybe she wanted to tell what she wanted for Christmas. She said, you said you were going to put heat in the house Christmas time, and it's getting cold. I got the heat in Thanksgiving.
Christmas.
No. She wanted it. She said, I told her it was going to be Christmas, but I got it finished for the bedrooms on Thanksgiving vacation.
Can you tell me that story?
Well, Old Main, that was the oldest building on campus, and it did not have an elevator in it. You had to climb the stairs to get to the 3rd floor. And I knew that Betty's class might have been a gym class because it was in the old gym there. If I got up to the 3rd floor for a certain hour class and looked out the window, I would see Betty going from one classroom to another.
One building.
One building, yeah, going down the sidewalk, one building to another. Yeah, that was the 3rd floor of Old Main.
Was that after you were married?
No.
No. That was in well, let's see. We got married in 48. It was before we got married, of course. And then we started. It was either 46 or 47, wasn't it?
Well, I graduated from high school in 46.
46.
And-
That's why I say it was 46 or 47, because we got married in April of 48.
And what did she look like when she was walking?
Oh, my goodness. She had a pleated skirt that I just loved.
Well, I had long blonde hair, as most young girls did, wore their hair long. And that,
Not as long as now, though. Not as long as now, where
Well-
it goes to the waist.
shoulder length, and
Yeah.
I had pretty hair, didn't I?
Oh, yes.
I don't think you had much of an option in answering that question, didn't I? The elbow was going.
I got prompted to answer that correctly, didn't I, Michael?
Yeah. When and why did you go to Brazil?
The university, we had a very active international program at that time, and the university saw that there was a contract to be sponsored by the United Nations Development Program, and Dean Kepper had been on some international assignments, and the Dean Kepper and the central administration, the president, decided that SIU should bid on that, or attempt to get that contract. President Morris was very internationally minded. Dean Kepper had been on some international assignments, and we had a department then, international agriculture. So the central administration, from the president on down to the dean's office, was aware of this opportunity and had put in an application to provide the personnel to go there and staff that project. And I was aware that the university had put in the application, but one day Dean Kepper called me in the office and he said, "Bill, I guess you've heard that SIU won that contract to provide the staff for that project in Brazil." I said, "Yeah, I heard that." He said, "We want you to go as chief of party and go down there and run that project for us." I said, "Are you sure you're talking to the right person?" He said, "I think we are." And that was the beginning. And it wasn't long till, we started making preparation. Well, first of all, I told him, I said, "I'll have to go home and ask my wife." And
What did you think?
It scared me. It was pretty scary stuff. I'd never been out of the United States, did not speak any foreign language. I'd had French in high school, but,
I had 2
was
years
scary.
of French in high school, and always it was an artificial language. As far, I didn't really expect to use it, and I didn't use it, but by having had that in high school, I at least knew a little bit about a Latin-based language and the arrangement of the sentences and so forth. But I took 37 lessons of Portuguese after I found out I was going down there, and I took off to Brazil. Well, first of all, I went by way of Rome to the FAO headquarters. And there was a Brazilian there in the FAO headquarters that I was introduced to him, and he was the one that was coordinating the project. And I sat in the room with him and heard him speak. He was speaking English to me. A Brazilian came in, he was talking Portuguese, and a French person, he came in talking French. And I was utterly amazed that that guy could change from one language to another and continue the conversation. Well, I was in Rome, didn't know a word of Italian, but I had not taken any deodorant with me. And I went into what was obviously a pharmacy, and I looked around. I was trying to figure out where the deodorant would be. And finally, a man indicated that he was willing to help me, and I said, I want desodorante. He reached back and got me some deodorant. And I had my first experience in a foreign language. It really, really foreign because it wasn't in a classroom anymore.
About going to Brazil? Well, Virginia got married in April, so she was away from home and a newlywed. But Kathy was in school at SIU, and she had babysat, kind of long-term babysitting for a couple down the street that had two small children. And the plan was that she would live with that family and take care of their children and go to school. And of course, we took Naomi with us. She was in 5th grade, wasn't she?
Uh-huh.
And
No. She had finished 5th grade. She was in high school. She did her last.
Oh yeah, that's
she
right.
Did her last 2 years.
She did her
of high
2
school.
years of high school by correspondence. So it was scary. Well, the people were lovely. You know, they were just, everybody was kind to us, and we invited out a lot, and everybody just couldn't have been nicer. And that was also a scary part because, you know, in those situations, if you really can't converse very well, it's stressful. So I guess the thing that was good about it was also the most stressful.
We were fortunate in that our primary contacts were with educated people at the university.
Yeah.
Where the stress came in is when you'd go downtown and go into a store and the clerk would be a native Brazilian and no knowledge of English. That was where the stress came in.
Yeah, shopping for food was terrible.
Educated people typically had enough knowledge of English that you could, between the two persons, one speaking poor English and the other one speaking poor Portuguese, you could usually get along.
They, the educated people were also the most polished, of course, and they could help you. If they saw you were struggling to find a word, or they would either finish the sentence for you, supply, you know, they would help you. But when I went shopping, if I got into a situation where the person who was helping me didn't understand, they would talk louder. That their response was to, you know, shout at you. Well, that tore me up, you know. So the hardest part was just living in a you know, a situation where you were faced almost daily with a problem being understood, communicating. So, Nay could, she understood, well, we all understood almost everything that was said to us. It was hard to respond sometimes. But Nay got, so she was pretty well.
She was fluent.
Yeah, she spoke it, but she didn't she didn't like to. I mean, she often spoke English when she, in fact, they had a boyfriend down there. He was the son of the
My
Brazilian,
counterpart.
yeah, Brazilian project director, and the two of them would chatter to each other, she in English and he in Portuguese, and laugh, tell jokes, carry on, and they wouldn't speak each other's language. They kept their own language. It was hilarious to listen to them because they'd have a fight. And he'd go out and slam the door and go home, and then the next day they'd go through the same thing again. So that was kind of funny. But it was, I think it was harder on me and maybe Nay than it was on Bill, because Bill spent his time with educated people. And as I said, if, they could help you, but the tradespeople and people on the street, they didn't know how to help you, so they just talked louder and faster. So.
An example of that, one day I was we lived in a building of 13 stories, and we were on the 12th story, weren't we? So we had an elevator to go up to the 12th floor and into our apartment. But one day I was down in the lobby waiting for the university provided a car to come and pick the team members up. I was down in the lobby waiting for the car, and a person came in off the street, a young lady, and she was dressed, I would say she looked like she was coming to go to work, like she was probably a house cleaning person or something, She came in and she looked around, and I said, may I help you? I said in Portuguese. And she said, onde é o levador? Levador. I didn't know a word, levador. And I said, okay. Onde é o levador? Para levar as pessoas lá em cima, for to take those persons upstairs. Levar. But it's elevador is the real word. She had heard levador, or she had interpreted it being, so she was using it incorrect, she was pronouncing it incorrectly. And soon as she said it was to take persons upstairs, I knew that she was talking about the elevator. But she'd call it a levador rather than a elevador. By the way, I'll tell you a story about, I hadn't been there very long, and my counterpart came to me and said, Bill, I've got you scheduled to speak to the faculty tomorrow afternoon. Oh man, my Portuguese was still very limited then. And I thought, well, how am I going to make a suitable explanation or a presentation to the faculty? And on the way, going home, I thought about the Apostle Paul saying, when I was a child, I spoke as a child. When I became an adult, I threw away childish things, something like that. So I went to the bookstore and bought a Portuguese Bible. I went home and I looked in our Bible till I found that passage, and then I got it in Portuguese. So the next day when Doerr introduced me to the faculty, I said in Portuguese, I am speaking Spanish. Estou falando español. And they looked at me because I said it in my best interpretation of Portuguese, but I said I'm speaking Spanish. And then I said, at least my Brazilian friends tell me that Spanish is Portuguese poorly spoken. I am speaking Portuguese poorly, therefore it must be Spanish. And that was a good joke. And I had them. From then on, if I had trouble saying something, they'd say it for me. Well, a typical thing was go to a movie and have popcorn and at Ripple-Meyer's popcorn stand, wasn't it? Mm-hmm. Oh, one other thing. When we got if we had a bigger appetite, go to Witt's Barbecue for a barbecue sandwich. And Witt's
We also had if we had the money. If we had a bigger appetite and the money.
Well, we could go on a date for $1, 35 cents for a theater ticket. And that was 2 times. That was 70 cents, and popcorn or Coke, nickel a bag or a nickel a bottle, wasn't it? So for $1, you could go on a date and have a movie and a popcorn and a beverage.
Not really. We don't play cards. We just kind of work and.
We've always worked together.
Yeah.
For example, I would grow a garden. Bettye would can, process, freeze. Chickens, we had chickens. A farmer gave me a pig one time, and I put it in the barn down where I kept the pasture where the cow was, and we sent the hog to a processing plant and had a freezer. We always had lots of food. We've never experienced any shortage of food because we both came from a farm background and knew how to grow and produce garden crops. And it was. Did we already tell that Bettye had a pasteurizing equipment, and she'd pasteurize milk and sell it to some of the neighbors?
Mm-hmm. We had a pressure canner, so I canned food, and as Bill said, we bought a freezer from Sears on time payments. But as soon as we could manage the monthly payment, we bought a big freezer, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah. I think it was
22 feet or
something. Yeah, cubic feet. Yeah.
And we tried to fill that up in the summertime. And
butter, chickens, vegetables. Oh, yeah. Churn cream and make butter.
Mm-hmm. We lived like we were living on a farm, and we knew how to do that, because that's how we grew up. Here to Carbondale.
Again.
To Pakistan.
Pakistan.
Why'd we go?
Well, we were in Brazil for 2 years. We came home, and then for 4 years after that, I was a half-time in the International Education Office as the coordinator for that project, hiring people to send down there, getting reports from down there and so forth. So I was half-time in the International Education, half-time in the College of Ag. And then one day, Dean Kepper called me in. He said, Bill, we're working with the University of Illinois to try to get a project in Pakistan. And he said, the Pakistan team is coming to the U of I next week, and I want you to go up there and represent us before that Pakistan team. Well, I was to present or to advocate for the academic portion of the project. Another person was to represent the U of I on research, and then Bill Thompson was the overall coordinator. Well, the U of I people, the Pakistan people, were at the U of I just because they wanted to meet the requirements. They had to visit different universities and then choose which one they wanted. Well, they wanted to go to Colorado because Colorado had already been in that country on another project. And so they were hot to get to Colorado, but their attitude was, we'll just stop by Illinois to meet the requirements. They weren't interested in us at all. Well, when I was giving our pitch for the education program, the academic program, they told us the situation. They said, we have students that'll sign up for a class and they never attend the class, and when they take the exam, they pass it. And I said, well, you don't need that job as a faculty member. If they can sign up for your class, never come to class, and then pass the exam, why have you? Any secretary can sign your name, get them to sign their name on the enrollment form. Well, that sort of got their attention when I challenged them to even having a job. But then they started talking seriously to us about how we would manage the project, and SIU and the U of I got the project. They went on to Colorado, but they came back and finally signed up for us to have the contract.
What did you think of going to Pakistan?
What did I think of it? I was scared to death. It was more frightening than going to Brazil by far. It's the Middle East. It was not long after the Vietnam War, and Afghanistan was fighting somebody at the time. It was the Middle East was, as it is now, a scary place. And I was never really comfortable there. It wasn't a good place for women. The women still were wearing the long, covered from head to foot. So it was not a comfortable place for a woman to be.
That was a short-term assignment, though. I was there 3 months continuously as
Did you take a
we were
necktie
developing the
cleaner
project.
for Daddy?
It's already been brought back.
It's
And
been brought back.
Betty just came over. You were there, what, about a month? Not more than
Yeah,
I was there 3 months the first time, and then I went back with Betty for a second visit. I think I was there 3 times altogether. The biggest success that I observed there was that the student body at the university was all male, no female students. And
you leaving?
one day, as
You
we
don't
were
want to hear
going back
this
to the
again, huh?
one day as we were going back to the hotel after the normal day's work, my supervisor, Bill Thompson, said, Bill, I've got you scheduled to speak to the entire faculty in the morning about what we are planning for this project. We were there as a development team, and then we were supposed to develop a complete program that would go over several years. Well, that was the first I knew I was supposed to make this presentation, so I went home and burned the midnight oil a little bit, and the next morning went out and set up the room where we were to meet. We were going to meet in the library. I put a folding chair up on the table and leaned an old chalkboard to it and made some notes on the chalkboard. And about the 3rd or 4th item down, I had written women. It was an all-male student body. There were 2 or 3 female faculty members, but no women students. Well, just about the time the program was supposed to start, the faculty was all there, seated. A person came in from the chancellor's office and said, "The chancellor is coming, but he's been delayed. He can't be here just now, but he wants you to go ahead with your presentation. And when he comes, he'll just join in." So the messenger left. I turned to the faculty. I said, "You saw the messenger?" And I told them what the content of the message was. I said, "He wants me to go ahead," and I was going to make about a 20-minute presentation, and then I was going to open it for questions. "But if he comes, he'll want to know what I've already said. I don't want to repeat it a second time, and you don't want to hear it a second time. So let's just reverse the agenda and open it for questions first. Are there any questions?" And one man jumped up and said, "Why you got women written up there?" And I said, "Well, does the farm wife have any responsibility for the garden at the family farm?" "Oh, yes, that's her job. That's her job." "Does she have any responsibility for the poultry and the small animals?" "Oh, yes, that's her job." I said, "If she has a need for technical information about herbicides or insecticides or animal diseases, anything like that, can she go to a male farm advisor and seek information from him?" "Oh, no." I said, "Then she needs a female farm advisor that she can talk to get the technical information that she needs." "Yes."
I think we're repeating ourselves. You told that. Did you hear this before? Well,
No.
you told the same story last
Yeah,
night.
well, it's a good story. That fall, they
I'm
started
talked out.
admitting female students. But we set up rules for them. Now, you can't just admit one or two. You've got to admit at least, I think we said at least 5, but we had a minimum number. I said, you've got to provide housing for them, the same as you provide housing for the male students. You've got to let them have all the same privileges that male students have. And they admitted female students. And the last time that I had direct information, they had a better placement record for their female graduates than they had for their male graduates. And the reason was they didn't have many female graduates yet, and there were jobs for them, but they had an abundance of male graduates because once you had graduated from college and got a job, you had a lifetime appointment. It was a privilege and an honor to be employed, and you couldn't get fired, basically. You just, you became instilled.
Check out.
You're going to check out?
I'm talked out.
Okay. After I'd been to Brazil, about a month before we were scheduled to come home, I had a letter from Dean Kepper. And he said, "Bill, Gene Wood is leaving the dean's office." Gene was the assistant dean. Said he's leaving the dean's office, and if you want the assistant dean job, I'll hold it for you. Now, I call that real affirmative action, don't you? He'd hold the job for me. Well, I came home, and of course, he appointed me assistant dean at the College of Ag, and I was also an assistant dean in the international education because I was supposed to continue working with the Brazil project for 4 more years. But I had never taken a course on how does one be an assistant dean. I'd never had any experience being an assistant dean. I was just invited to be assistant dean by a person that knew what I'd been doing for several years. And I got to thinking about that. The dean had me join various associations. I joined SULGIC, the National Association for Land Grant Colleges and State Universities, and 2 or 3 other professional organizations. I would go to the meetings. I even got elected to be secretary one year of the Midwest group. And I thought, here I am blundering around as an assistant dean. I don't know how to be an assistant dean. So I asked him if I could take a sabbatical. And I told him I wanted to visit 6 universities that had ag departments and find out what the assistant dean did. And I chose that there were 3 non-land grant institutions that were members of SUDIAP, American Association of State Universities and Land Grant Colleges. I went to 3 land grant institutions. Went to Illinois, Purdue, Wisconsin, Texas Tech, Arizona State, and I can't remember the third non-land grant. And I told each of those assistant deans when I would get there, I'd say, I'm out to steal $1 million worth of ideas. And they'd laugh. I'd talk to them about what they did, what their programs were, what they unique activities. And I learned $1 million worth of ideas. I came back to ASIU and I took some of Purdue's information. Purdue had a program every year they'd haul the dean into a meeting on a manure spreader. That was a big activity. And of course, it developed esprit de corps. From that, I started an alumni association here for the College of Ag. I started a program of alumni meeting at the DuQuoin State Fair each August. I centralized the scholarship program in the College of Ag. When I first came here as assistant dean, every professor had some business contact that a business would offer a scholarship to a student, but that professor would carry that scholarship around in his pocket, and when he'd see a very good student, he'd offer him the scholarship. Well, the same student would be good friends, a good student to 3 or 4 professors. He'd end up with 3 or 4 scholarships, and another student that was almost as good, or maybe even better, but just didn't know one of those professors, didn't have any scholarship. So I talked the dean into centralizing the scholarship program in the College of Ag. And then I started making a bulletin to describe the various scholarships that were available. And I would first of all award scholarships to people that they were unique for whatever scholarship was being offered. And first of all, I'd go over to the financial assistance office and see what scholarships were already being awarded to College of Ag people. Some would already have a full ride scholarship. Nothing that they had to pay themselves. And they were the kind of students that these professors were handing out additional scholarships to. So I'd see what the central office was doing, and I'd get that, and then I'd start applying the general rules for each of the scholarship to other students who were eligible and interested and not already receiving a scholarship. So I got $1 million worth of ideas, more or less, and it changed things in the college bag. I worked on fairly consistently was student work, helping students to get appropriate work, and we started the university started going out and having recruitment and advisement sessions in some of the larger cities. That was a good thing for us. And the College of Ag at that time had a big increase in enrollment because of city kids coming. That was back in the late 70s, I guess. Kids from Chicago wanted to come to SIU because that was as far away as they could go and still pay in-state tuition. And it was the time when the big green revolution was going along, and people wanted to get back to nature. Forestry department grew till the enrollment there exceeded the combined enrollment of the other three departments. So that helped to bring a lot of attention to the College of Ag. It was a popular thing for me to want to promote SIU because SIU was my original university experience, and I was proud to be a student and later a faculty member here, so it was easy for me to promote SIU. I still do. I was talking to a young man in the greenhouse this morning over on campus. I came here as a student in 1941, as a 16-year-old freshman. I was 16 for 2 months of the beginning of my freshman year. And the reason I was only 16, I went to a country grade school, and 1 year there were over 40 pupils in that country grade school, and we had every grade one teacher, and we did not have any. We weren't supposed to have a sixth grade that year, but during the summer, a family moved into the district that had a son who was going to be in the sixth grade. We had no sixth grade, but since he was already in the sixth grade, the teacher promoted 2 of us out of the 5th grade into the 6th grade so he would have classmates. I was one of the 2. So that's why I finished 8th grade and still was only 16 years old. But that was too young to be in high school. But I was a good student, so I got along all right. But I was immature as far as life in general was concerned. You ask about a lot of things. When I got out of high school, my objective was to be a teacher of mathematics and science, because those were my favorite subjects in high school. And one of the reasons that they were a favorite subject, my algebra teacher was a young man just out of college, and Virginia's high school was a place that a lot of young people would get their first teaching job. And if they were good, they would advance then. They'd go. This young man who whom I had as a freshman, was there 1 year and got a job at West Point teaching military. But the reason I liked him so much, he had a great way of teaching with meaning. And one spring day, the windows were open. We had no air conditioning in the school in those days. Window was open, and he looked out the window, and the railroad went right north from the high school. And there were a railroad section crew working on the railroad up there, and they were driving spikes. And he'd say, "Look at that." He'd say, "See him raise the sledgehammer?" And he came down. He said, "Now listen." You'd see him hit that spike, and then he'd raise the hammer again, and you'd hear ping. He said, "You remember I told you that light travels faster than sound?" That's the first time that I had experienced it. You could see him hit the spike, and then about the time he got the sledgehammer above his head, ping. And I thought, man, that guy can really teach. He knows how to show you that light travels faster than sound. So that was what I came here as a major. Because I was a math major, chemistry, physics minor, when I went in the Navy, see, Pearl Harbor happened fall quarter, the year I was a freshman. But I was only 17 at that time. I was 17, October 28th, December 7th, Pearl Harbor. And one wasn't subject to military draft until age 18. So I had another year of school before I was drafted into the Navy. But when I got my draft called into the draft, went to the recruitment station in Chicago, and first of all, you had to pass the physical. If you passed the physical, then you went on a little farther, and they gave a colorblind test. If you passed the colorblind test and passed the physical, then you were eligible for any branch of the services. They asked me what service. I told them Navy, because I thought it would. Well, I had a next door neighbor on the farm who was in the Navy, and I also had a cousin who had completed a complete tour in the Navy, 4 years. So I chose the Navy because I thought it would be easier to shoot at a ship than to shoot at a man. I thought I'd be tender-hearted maybe shooting at a man, but I guess it wouldn't be. But anyway, I chose the Navy. Went on a little farther then, down the line. The guy looked at my sheet that was carrying along with us. He said, "Oh, you were a math major, chemistry, physics minor. You should take the cook test." I thought he meant to be a cook or a cook and baker. And then I said, "What's that?" And he said, "Oh, that's a test to see if you're eligible for radar." Well, I took the test and I passed it. So they put me in a electronic training program, and sent me first of all to the Naval Armory there at the foot of Randolph Street in Chicago. And I had a 4-week program there, basically to learn to use a slide rule. There was no computers in those days. And then they sent me to the outgoing unit there, and that was just not very far from Naval Armory, and gave me a choice of Oklahoma State or Texas A&M for the electronic training. I chose Texas A&M because my mother was born in Texas, and I thought, well, I'll go back to Mom's old state. And from that, the initial program was Texas A&M. Then I was sent to Corpus Christi, Ward Island, Corpus Christi, and got the training on radar units. And then I was shipped to Litchfield Park, Arizona, 2 years in the Navy in the desert of Arizona. Got court-martialed one time. We would be assigned shore patrol duty occasionally, and I was on shore patrol, and I was one of our duties was we'd go into town in a Jeep into Phoenix, go to the Army Military Police headquarters, see if there were any sailors locked up or in trouble. If there were no sailors in trouble, then we'd just patrol the bars in town till a certain time when the bars were supposed to close. Then our job was to be sure all military personnel were out of the bars. One night I was coming back from the bar closing and stopped at a bar near the Navy base, went in. The military personnel were all out. I went back out to get in my Jeep. The Jeep was gone. It had been stolen. Next day, they court-martialed me. Well, they asked me to explain the situation. And I said, well, the Jeep just had a snap switch. It didn't have a key, just off-on switch. Anybody could drive it. And as soon as they verified that, they said, court dismissed. But the Army group, or we assume it was an Army group, because the next day they found the Jeep in a fence row near Luke Field, an Army air base just north of the Navy base. So probably some soldiers came out of that bar, saw the Jeep, got in it and drove it till they were nearly to their base, stuffed it in a fence row. Yeah.
Somebody's probably sitting around telling their grandson probably stole a Jeep.
Yeah,
One
no
night
doubt.
we came out of the bar and we took the Jeep. There was no key. It was just a flip switch.
Yeah. I'll tell you this, Michael, just privately. You don't have to record it unless you want to. After I came back from Brazil, I could carry on a conversation pretty well in Portuguese. And I guess that information got into some office in Washington, D.C. So one day I got a telephone call here on campus. Said, we'd like for you to come out to Washington, D.C. We're having a meeting with some personnel from Portugal, and we want people who can speak Portuguese. And I said, you sure you want me? Yeah, we want you. So I went in, talked to the dean. He said, oh, sure, go on. So went to Washington, D.C., and they had a room there in a hotel, a big round table, maybe 8 or 10 people at each table and 4 tables. And I was sitting between 2 ladies from Portugal. And then there would be a man and, all around. And we had lunch, talking. Pretty soon this lady to my right said, oh, I am so glad I came on this trip. Said, my husband wanted me to come, but I didn't want to come because I don't speak any English at all. And I didn't think anyone in the United States would speak Portuguese. And here I've come here, and everyone speaks Portuguese. Well, they had recruited people from they had a guy there from Phoenix, Arizona.
Every corner of the earth.
Yeah.
A ton of people that speak Portuguese.
Yeah. Everyone speaks Portuguese.